Well, we're returning to our top story that the heads of ASIO and ASIS are no longer permanent members of the National Security Committee of Cabinet, and how disturbing it is that our government seems to place more importance on climate change advice rather than terrorism, foreign interference and espionage. Joining me now is Strategic Analysis Australia Director Michael Shoebridge. Michael, thank you very much for your time this evening. Look, how concerned are you by these revelations that the Albanese government doesn't want our top intelligence chiefs permanently in the National Security Committee of Cabinet?
Well, Sharri, I think it fits with a pattern where the Albanese government has a view of the world as they would like it to be, and they don't like inconvenient truths. So when you read documents that they put out saying we're in the most dangerous strategic environment since the Second World War, they clearly don't believe their own words. We'll see this on real display with the visit of the Chinese foreign minister. You would not know that the Chinese state and its military is threatening peace in our region from the happy snaps and handshakes we're going to see with this visit over the rest of the week. So not wanting advice from our intelligence chiefs is an indicator that they don't want to listen to the advice. So don't have them in the room to give it.
Exactly. And as I've reported tonight, there's increasing speculation from within the intelligence community that Mike Burgess and Andrew Shearer, who are two of the two most experienced intelligence operatives that we have serving at the moment, there's increasing speculation that they might not be reappointed. You know, obviously I don't expect you to comment on that speculation, but how much weaker would our national security be without these eminent professionals leading these two agencies?
Well, Sharri, it would be weakened, but the disturbing thing is this idea that if we don't hear the analysis, it isn't happening. You can't stick your fingers in your ears and silence the world. So it shows the government is determined on a policy approach regardless of what the world actually looks like.
And so why add Chris Bowen and his department secretary to the National Security Committee of Cabinet? I mean, how does climate change come into the top priorities in terms of our threats to our nation when Mike Burgess, in his own threat assessment, he didn't mention climate change once. Instead, he mentioned as the top terror threat, Islamic terrorism, and as the top security threat to our sovereignty, foreign interference. And he made it clear afterwards that that was China.
Yes, well, climate change can drive other security problems. It can mean that there are more conflicts and there's more people movement. But unless you've got people making sense of that from a national security perspective, it's like one hand clapping to have Chris Bowen in the room. So I think it's a disturbing downplaying of real national security challenges and threats and an attempt to just put them in the background and hope they go away.
Look, let's have a look at one of the UN bodies now. The UN is becoming increasingly discredited, and in an alarming move, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been appointed the presidency of the United Nations Conference on Disarmament. This is a joke. Now, this is a rotating position, and it'll keep Iran in control over the international body. Michael, how can these bodies function with Iran heading the UN Agency for Disarmament? It's actually ludicrous and unthinkable.
Well, Sharri, this is not a lonely event. China has a seat on the UN Human Rights Council. There was a Chinese head of Interpol, the International Police Agency, until he was recalled to China and disappeared, like the previous Chinese foreign minister. So having Iran, a burglar when it comes to disarmament, chairing the UN conference is no more absurd than what's happening on human rights or Interpol. It just shows the world's lost its way when it comes to the UN. The UN is meant to be able to speak truth to autocrats and repressive regimes rather than pretend they're the opposite of what they are.
Yeah. Exactly right. Now, quickly before we go, Israel is sending a delegation to the United States to discuss an alternative to a military offensive in the southern city of Rafah in Gaza. But at the same time, we've seen that Benjamin Netanyahu has declared he's not going to succumb to international pressure and take his foot off Hamas. What do you think we're seeing here? I mean, clearly Joe Biden is going down this path, at least in part, for political reasons. But do you think this delegation indicates that Israel might start to cave in to some of his demands?
I don't think Israel can stop fighting the war against Hamas until it's dismantled the remaining Hamas organisation that is in Rafah. So I don't think that is going to happen. A lot of this is, as you say, about the domestic politics of the different countries rather than thinking about what's going to work in the Middle East. I think there's way too much of this performance from Western leaders, and we forget what war looks like. Israel's in the middle of a war, and there's a humanitarian crisis as a result. But Netanyahu is a bit like Margaret Thatcher, isn't he? The lady's not for turning.
Well, you know, he is a very controversial figure, but at this point, I mean, who doesn't support the destruction of Hamas and the return of the hostages? No one sensible, that's for sure. Michael Shoebridge, thank you very much for your time tonight.